Take it down in your head and try to remember it. Jesus always drew me. In fact, if I had found any minister that ever talked in parables, I would have become a minister, but I examined all the books of sermons and none of them used them. Jesus talked only in parables after the Sermon on the Mount, and without a parable spake he not unto them. So I made a careful study of them, and I made this discovery. He told them in pairs, masculine and feminine. Every one of them is paired. Just like Noah took the creatures into the ark so they would multiply and reproduce after their time. And I think Jesus must have had that purpose. And I'm going to tell you, by taking a few of those parables, I have seen a great movement grow in America. Here's, for instance, the mustard seed that grows and spreads for the birds to come in the branches. That is the kind of a parable that appealed to men out of doors. And then he said, in almost the same breath, it's like leaven that makes the bread rise, and that's for women indoors. Now, a great scientist has said that if you have enough dough and put a little yeast in that and leave it for 11 months, it will expand to the dimensions of the earth. It's unbelievable. Unlimited quality that leaven or yeast has. And up in our country, if you plant some mustard, the kind of mustard we have, and don't have a road or a river or an ocean to stop it, in about 11 years, it would spread all over the surface of the world. So one covers the surface, one fills the inner volume of the earth, and a great idea is born. And I made this discovery with all these parables, all different. They must have one central philosophy, one great central truth. They were always aimed about the kingdom of heaven. He began them by saying the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a mustard seed, and so on. And now when you want to find the common denominator, there's many different things. There's a number of different methods, and the method I like is that of the bee hunter. When he wants to find wild honey, he catches a few bees and lets one go, and he notices the bee line it takes. He walks 100 yards over here and lets it go, and he sees the bee line it takes. He goes around that circuit and lets it go, and then he goes to where those three bee lines meet, and there's the honey. In the same way, I examined all these parables and found that all the bee lines met at one point, and it was this. The central theme of all was the ever-expanding power of the love of God. Absolutely nothing to stop it. And so in 11 months, it could fill the volume of the earth. Mustard seed could fill the surface of the earth. Then there's another pair about light. And by the way, in my book, The Way, the Truth, and the Life, in which I take up the teachings of Jesus, I pair all of these. So if you want to know what those pairs are, you'll find that very illuminating. The virgins come waiting for the bridegroom, and 5 of them have neglected to bring their oil. The other 5 that have them, they can come in to the wedding. And light is a thing that expands. That's women. They like marriages. Somebody's friend of ours is going to be married, and all the women of my family want to go, and of course they want me to go, and I would, in fact, it was only reluctantly I went to my own wedding. Anything that bores me is just a wedding. And the women, it's better than Barnum's Circus anytime. Now, so that appeals to the women, but they had to have the light. Then here's for the men now, businessmen. Talents. One had 10, one had 5, one had 2. 2 of them put it in so it would expand and multiply, but one, thinking that he's a hard boss, he ties it up in a napkin so it couldn't expand. You take this quality that you have here, you're getting here, this kingdom spirit of love and joy, and you go home and you put it in their napkin, and you're not going to let anybody get any of your love or your joy. You'll find it'll just dry away, and the other folks will be given to them. Well, now, I'm not going to go on any further with the parables, although I just want to hint at the two greatest ones. One is the Good Samaritan, and one is the prodigal son, where it's love itself that is expanding. No symbolism like light or yeast or anything. It is where love, in both cases, goes overboard, where you're not supposed, ordinary people aren't supposed to use it. For instance, every man will be love his son, who's good, but he may not love the son who's disgraced the family. The Samaritans will all love the Samaritans, but it isn't customary for them to love the Jews that have oppressed them. So here is one flows over, expands over to your enemies. One is over to the sinners. Marvelous when you see a expansive power. He just took the... I think it just came through Jesus. I don't think he sat down ever and said, I'm going to organize these carefully, because that isn't the way. I know we do things at the camp. We're more surprised, we leaders are, the way the ideas come flowing out, fall into form naturally, than if we just organize. And the one kind of speakers that camps don't want are ministers who have their firstly, secondly, thirdly, got it all worked out a year in advance and haven't memorized everything else. And if an inspiration tries to come through, they can't even get a chance because they've got it all memorized. See, that's what I mean. It came through Jesus. These things just, the Lord just, he said, I don't say these things, but Father speaketh through me. Well, I said, let's use these. So I said, light. I was at the World's Fair. How many of you were at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893? Don't we have any gray heads here? How many were there in 1933? Put your hands up. 40 years later. You know how long it takes light to go from, what's the name of that star, Arcturus? 40 years. I was at the camp in 1933, and at 8 o'clock, all of a sudden, all the lights went on just like that, and I said, who turned them on? No human hand touched it. I had a very delicate instrument ready to catch a light beam that had left Arcturus 40 years before, and it hit that at 8 o'clock, and bang. In other words, just as the other World Fair had ended, a light, while it was in progress, lights came over each day to light hit. Well, that way light can expand like that. And so I said, well, I'm going to establish a camp farthest out. 25 years ago, we had one, and we hadn't had any light come into it. It's expanded until 40 last year, and then the calls from all over the world, and we spread them all over the world, and we expect that light that is there to keep on expanding. Just trust and put these parables to work and see what happens. Then I said to my Bible class 15 years ago, if the 12 disciples had each put $1 at interest, in 700 years that would have multiplied by interest and compound interest, so it could have bought up the whole world. Why didn't they do it? If some 12 men had done it 700 years ago, we would now have our economic system under the Christ method. Why didn't they do it 700 years ago? And I said, and the next Sunday I said, I've been thinking that over, and the reason they didn't do it is because they wouldn't be there to see it, and why aren't we doing it? So I'd like to invite 12 of you come up and give me $12 each next Sunday, just 12 of you. And we're going to put it, we'll call it a gift to the stars, and see what will happen 700 years from now. So they came up, 12 of them, and they felt very highly honored. And I put it at unusual interest. I didn't put it in the bank. I gave it away to good causes. And then my wife died 3 years later. They wanted to have a memorial for her because she was a tither. They'd like to give 300. The Gideon's Band, we called them, like to give something, and it amounted to $4,000 a year. We took 500 to start to underwrite the beginning of the Clear Horizons. We supported missionaries and all kinds of things for those 3 years. Then Roger Babson said, Roger Babson said, if you only form a foundation farthest out, so it would be free of income tax laws, instead of giving you $50 for your scholarship, I could give you $150 and it wouldn't cost me any more. So we established that. And it's been expanding and expanding. Now we're in a stage where before I end, I'm going to tell you how we could use $100,000 to $200,000 or $300,000, but I'm going to tell you this. As this kept on expanding, I got a telephone call when I was Norman Vincent Peale's church. It's a woman in a faraway state. She said, when my husband died 10 years ago and left me with 3 little boys, there's no money, I started raising flowers. I took God as a senior partner, and I took your textbook. I will lift up mine eyes as my textbook. And I've prospered so more than any nurseryman in the state, and they don't understand how a woman can succeed so well. She said, I want to send you $24,000 every year. Now, where do those things come from? And that's been keeping Koinonia alive, and the Fanner Bees and so on. Now, I'm trusting. I want you to give it the Lord and let it expand, because I want to tell you some more expansion. In 1935, Kagawa had written me to start a Kingdom of God movement, asking me if I would, like he'd started over there. So I wrote a little booklet called The Silver Sandals and said we're going to start this as kind of just sort of an unseen movement, just in prayer. We're not going to have any letterheads or any offices. It's going to be secret, growing under the ground, just like planting a seed. 7 years from now, I said, it'll grow up into a tree, and then we can take all those seeds, plant them. That'd be 1942. And by 1949, another 7 years, we'll have an orchard. We can plant them all over the world. Now, I didn't know how prophetically I was speaking. For 1942, Sam Shoemaker and Stanley Jones wrote me and said they had come to the conclusion that we three would get together and invite in a carefully selected group of spiritual men, leaders, to meet once a year in Washington for 2 or 3 days of prayer. It would be have a fine, wholesome effect upon the nation. So we brought in Frank Laubach and Starr Daily and Glenn Harding and Rufus Mosley and Norman Vincent Peale and Albert Day and a splendid group. Now, for 12 years, we've been meeting regularly. I haven't missed a single one of them. But that was in 1942, and I said to my friends, it's become a tree, and then I expanded it. You can't get the Silver Sandals anymore because it's been absorbed in the larger book, 2 or 3 gathered together on the world situation. Well, in 1949, at a camp in Pennsylvania where Starr Daily and Frank Laubach and Louise Eggleston were leaders, a great vision came to Starr Daily one night, and it just took the camp by storm. He said the time has come to enlarge the camp farthest out into a mission farthest out and go into a world movement. Well, now I want to tell a little bit about that because it's been growing. In 1948, we sent a pilot group. I led 42 people on a trip through Europe, and we sounded out the ground before this thing burst upon even Franklin, Starr Daily, and that group. In 1951, Roland Brown, he took a group to Europe and spoke a few times and caught the imagination of people of England. In 1951, all the bishops and the leading ministers of England invited Roland Brown to come over and spend 7 months. They'd open up the churches from one end of the nation to the other, and he simply packed the churches, and the churches are almost dead in England. The attendance has been so poor, and he's the only layman that's ever spoken in the high pulpit in Westminster, in Canterbury Cathedral. And next year, if he went over there, they had him speak there again. And when he left, they got out a magazine supplement of the Christian Herald of England, but nothing in it but articles about Roland Brown by all these famous ministers, that no one had done what he had done. So we, when we felt led here in 1954, you see now that's 7 years, we'll end in 1956, spreading it to get the seeds planted around the world and nurturing them and cultivating them. And by 1956, I think it's going to permeate even into the government. We noticed that this expanding thing, by just doing it on this realm of 7 and not being hurried or anything else, letting the Lord take his time, is irresistible. We've opened the doors for that. Princess Wilhelmina had us come and spend the morning with her and opens up Holland for us. In England, all the leading ministers, so many of them came to this camp, and 33 of them, and 7 of them that Roland had plowed and got some hearts opened up in the year that he was there, they were really CFO type. You'd think you were sitting down there with Starr Daily and Frank Laubach and George Hales and Cobb and Glenn Harding, Roland Brown. There they were, and they wanted us to have a camp farthest out in Devon, in Swanwick, and up in Scotland in Stirling. Just got a letter from Roland yesterday. 2 of them want to come over to America, the 2 best ones, the ones that make it, and go to a number of camps. If they had $1,000, they could make it. And so I'm just hoping that oil will burst through and we'll have enough for things like that. But the point is, then they'll just carry the camps and they'll just spread like that all over England. Now, in India, we had 3 camps farthest out, and it thrilled them so that they want us to come back to but the missionaries were working in the different fields, and they say, we have our vacation in May. We go up in the mountains, several hundred missionaries, and we need this more than the people. If you'll come over and have a camp farthest out there in May, set us on fire, we can go out there, and then we can just set all India on fire. We've discovered how this will all open up. In Japan, we had 2 camps, and and they wanted to come back and spend a longer time and spread them all over the country. In the Philippines, we had 2, and they wanted more, and so on. So what we need, I'm looking around to find folks that have that gift. They can talk to. I'm not leaving this country again, but Roland Brown will spend 6 months every year, and we want to find someone who can team with him, and as a speaker, and someone who can lead creative writing, and we'll, for $10,000, we could send a team of 3 persons around the world, and for $25,000, we could send 3. Now, this is what I began to see, the great possibilities of keeping up this, all this. Now, I want to tell you what some experience we had in our journey. I took my coat off and left my notes there. Well, when I was when I wrote A Man's Reach, toward the end I make this statement: if they're ever in danger of a world war, again, of a third world war, I'm going to ask for an army of 300,000 people for 3 months, and I'll guarantee that we'll stop the war before it starts. Now, that's saying a whole lot. It's like sticking your neck out, and I've done that a few times when I'm absolutely sure. That's the way the people will give you the chance. There's a big bully in our high school. He's 6'4", and he's bullying everybody, knocking them around. And he shoved me in the snow, and he said to a bunch of boys, I could lick him with one hand. Well, something had to stop him. I stuck my neck out. I said, I bet I could lick you in 10 rounds. That's just what he wanted, and he arranged he got the barn or that haddock. He arranged the ropes and put signs up everywhere so everybody could come see what a wonderful fighter he was. Folks, I knocked him down 8 times in the 3rd round, and he never did any more bullying. But the only chance to prove what I could do was to stick my neck out and give him a chance. I'd like to have the government say, you're doing a lot of big talking there. They'll give you that 300,000 and see what you can do, and I'll tell you what I would do. I put them in camps of 300 each. Take 1,000 camps, wouldn't it? With leaders like Frank Laubach and Stanley Jones and Starr Daily and George Hales. After that, we have to bring in all these reserves. That's why I mentioned the name of Cobb, all these new discoveries. Well, now, I guarantee that in 3 months we could do that, because I have seen a team of 100 of us at Star Island, or just 100, and just for 10 days. And at the end we gave a prayer for Hitler, and the power is so great that the woman who's now in charge of all the Methodist missionary work of 3 continents, Africa, South America, and Europe, she said, I know something's happening to Hitler this very hour and this very minute. And the next morning the paper said, the Boston Transcript said, something happened to Hitler last night. His armies were lined up along the border of Poland, ready for a great blitzkrieg, and suddenly stopped. It was 2 o'clock at night. They said those that close to know the exact time. And it was 9 o'clock here, which was by exactly the minute Miss Lee said that. His armies were ready to march into Poland, and he countermanded the order and opened up telephone communications with Bellotti and Chamberlain, and offered to give a plebiscite, have them have a truce for 1 year. At the end of that time, let them have a vote. Poland, how much land they would cede. That would have stopped the war. The war never would have come if they had acted on it. But they didn't trust Hitler because he had double-crossed them, and he might have do it again. But folks, you can blaspheme the Son of Man, Jesus said, but not the Holy Spirit. If he'd had 40 camps farthest out in England and asked them all to pray, then he could have said to Hitler, you double-crossed us when you dealt with us on this level. But now you're not dealing with us on this level. We've been on our knees. We have prayers behind us. You're dealing with the Holy Spirit. We'll grant that armistice. But if you double-cross us this time, the boomerangs will come back on you, because Jesus said that's an unpardonable sin. It could have been stopped. Only I'll tell you other things that we've tried out. 1942, November 1st, I first wrote an article to tell people exactly what's going to happen. Like that baseball player, Babe Ruth. He had 2 strikes against him, and then the crowds began to boo him, and he pointed to the fence where he's going to knock the next one over. And the next one came, he knocked it straight over there. Now, I wrote exactly what had happened. I said, Bellotti Hitler is working on the subconscious plane, the psychic plane. A big article by Jung, the great psychologist, who had psychoanalyzed him, he said, I'm the subconscious of the nation. That's what Hitler said. He consults all kinds of, not oculists, but you know what I mean, occultists and fortune tellers and everything else. But at any rate, he was bringing in all that sort of stuff, and he was licking all the authority in Chamberlain, because they were down here on a pure mental plane. But I said, if we go up on a spiritual plane, just as high above the subconscious as it's above the conscious, and we get up there in the superconscious and get the nation to send love to Hitler. And 3 of us resigned our jobs, Starr Daily and Glenn Harding and myself. We began this going around the nation, taking 7 months, going to all the largest cities, and we just had them pour love on Hitler. All the battles that we fought before November 1st, 1942 were defeats. All of them were victories after that. Everything Hitler did before that was just like magic. Rolled over Poland, Czechoslovakia, France, and after that he banged up against Russians, banged back. Then he fired the generals, blamed them, and put in poor generals. I can tell you, the way to win is to get up take an elevator and go up above the sun and work with God. Well, now, I know that if I had 3 months, 300,000, well, and I said in this book, it wouldn't have to be fine young men like those 300,000 we lost by death in the Second World War, young men that have the hands on the future. They could be middle-aged or old people. They could be blind. They could be lame. But they'd have to meet one test that no armies ever had to meet. They'd have to all have absolute faith in the power of prayer. Well, if you want if they should grant an army, how could you train 300,000? You couldn't. You'd first have to have some officers' training camps. That's what the government does. And I said, well, all right, you'll start training officers. And what are the camps? Why, the camps farthest out. We've had for years, we've had officers' training camps. Now we're getting them all around the world. All we need to do is to get folks to come to those officers' training camps. and of leadership quality. If I had $50,000 to give free scholarships to any graduates of divinity schools, or any young ministers who couldn't afford to come, and some of the older ones who couldn't afford it. In other words, we could bring in about several thousand ministers to the camp, and then supposing we brought in 1,000, they go back and each have a church of about 300, and supposing we set those 1,000 ministers on fire in the camps, they go back and they set 300 on fire. You'd have your 300,000 right there. At the end of 3 years, at least you would. Well, there's $75,000, 25,000 for the traveling teams, 75,000 for free scholarships, and we could simply save the world. Now, we found wherever we went, and I'm putting this into a book because I can't, that in India, as a disciple of Gandhi, it is a little man of 85 pounds. He has stomach ulcers. He's about 60, and he refuses to go by train. He walks, and wherever he goes, he comes to a village, and he goes up and he talks first to the poor landowners and suggests that each one give some land to those who don't have it. Then he goes to the rich ones, and they'd be ashamed when they hear what these poor ones do, and they give. He's had several million acres already given. And he's got now up to 300 others working. Some of his workers, disciples, came to our Camps Farthest Out, and they are putting Jesus into the economic system. They're putting the methods of Jesus. And if they spread fat, and the only ones object are the communists. The communists see that they're stealing their thunder. The communists came into China, and they grabbed the land and took the 500 landowners from this county out and had them all kneel down and shot every one of them, and which made everybody of their friends mad and their relatives. And if this is done in this loving way, and they're doing it fast too, more and more. One landowner gave 100,000 acres. They see that that's the way that'll prevent communism coming in. And we go over there and have that 3 camps farthest out in India. They probably want more than that now. And oh my, how far they went in that. And how marvelous their paintings were, how their spiritual interpretations were, and the way we turn Buddhists and the Hindus into Christians. We would get a lot of those disciples of Vinoda, that's his name, coming here, and they could be and put Christ into it. Why, we just see the whole thing's there, and just a little, and they're spending $60 billion a year for wars, destruction. Our government is, and if he had 60,000, we wouldn't need 75,000 right away. Well, now I'm not going to ask anybody for this money. I want your prayers. I believe this is so important. When I pray it, there might be somebody, some oil man may come and say, I'll give you 100,000 a year myself for the next 2 years. It may be that 100 people over the country may say, we'll give you each $1,000 a year. It might be 1,000 folks that say, we'll each give you $100. It's one of those things that will be taken care of in his way. I'm not a bit concerned about money. Then I went to Koinonia, which has been falling between 2 stools. That is to be a continuing camp, kind of a continuous camp farthest out, or where we make it a training school and compete with the colleges that can do the job a whole lot better. And it'll cost us something like $500,000, an endowment of about $200,000 a year, or an endowment of $3 million to keep it going like that. And I went there and I just told them exactly what the trouble was. I said, now, if we could get a group of trained folks and pay the salary about $15,000, we could get 3 professors in a college of English. Like that Quaker College in Pennsylvania, Haverford. And Frank Laubach said, I have been asked to go to Hartford and do some teaching along this line. And so we'll just, and they, that's one of the colleges that isn't full. You have the trainees that wanted to go, could go right there. We could do it right there. And then we could use koinonia for like a continuing camp farthest out for conditioning these folks. And now the signs are coming that the armies may want to send some of their officers to spend a month at a place like that. And I said the trouble is with koinonia, the board of directors, there's only 90% all the way with this. 10% of the and more of the trustees have not been to camps, and there's a poo-poo all this business about prayer. They just they cut the thing asunder. I've never known a thing fail. We've had over 400 camps farthest out, perhaps 1,000. Only 3 of them have ever gone under financially or otherwise, and in each case there was a great jar and discard in the council ring. Where you have perfect harmony, always win. I've seen, as I mentioned, how in football, when you get that harmony, it always wins. I have a little company, paid no attention to business. I have a little company that's succeeding because we all have harmony. Judy Stowe was here, said she never saw such harmony anywhere. She's seen it in the Mac Publishing Company this year. But when you get what discard, well, we had discard in it once. And I had to tell the girl, the woman, that she really ought to leave. And the manager just couldn't stand it. She just told me I just had to fire her. And she went into hysterics, into pout, well, worse than that, that she never get another job. And she prayed to my sympathy so that kind-hearted Glenn said, all right, you stay another year but if you have any more of one of these tantrums, it just it'll last for a week. You'll just have to leave. She didn't have them ever when I was there, when I was away, and that's why. And she fell off a chair and broke her leg. And we had to go and put her in a hospital, and we, of course, paid all her expenses. And then we found everything she was doing was wrong. She was sending duns to those that had already paid. Those that hadn't paid, she wasn't sending. So I put prayer ahead of me. I went over after she was recovering, and we were paying her all. I said, you're a round peg in a square hole. And the Lord's looking after this business, and he's telling me that you can get a better job, or you get better pay some other place. She took it sweetly this time because with prayer, love had gone ahead, and she got a job that paid her better. And I'm going to tell you why. Sometimes the kindest thing, if you're working with people that are not in harmony, it's better have them resign for this reason. She broke her leg that time. If I left her in there another year, she'd have fallen and broken her neck. Because the Lord looked after that business, and he will not let us keep people on the ground. I was saving her life, you might say. And the same way, and I told them, I laid down the law at the koinonia, and all those who didn't go 100 way resigned. And immediately after that, everything began to pick up, even finances and everything else. It's almost, I'm going to put the story of it into a book. It's like Moses going down the Red Sea. And he said, and they said, well, here you're leaving off all those things and leaving all these helpers behind you. Even some of these that we expected to get financial help from. We let them resign because we were expecting financial help, but they weren't giving that other. And you're coming down there and say, well, aren't there graves back in Egypt? Why do you bring us out here and have the koinonia die out here in the desert? And well, how are you across the Red Sea? I want to say the waves are already starting to roll back. We're going to walk right across, and that Red Sea is a Red Sea of blood, of war. And I'm going to walk right there and tell how am I ever going to talk to the president along these lines, and the Senate. So I said, I've got an invitation to talk to the Senate Breakfast Club next winter. I'm just going to go, and not until the soles of my shoes are wet. Am I going to expect to see this determination for war begin to roll back? We're just going to utterly on faith. But how can you do it? You can't do it unless you have an army of praying folks, 300,000. And now I'm going to tell you a parable that thrills me. I told you the parable of Omi Hachiman, of the Omi Brotherhood. The center of it was that saintly man, Merrill Voorhees. He sent us out and told us to go down and see the pearl farm. The automobile we were in was driven by a couple of young men. devoted followers of Voorhees. They were brothers. One could talk English and the other could drive the car. And the car stopped. We took it to the garage, and they worked out a while. We went several miles and stopped again. We limped back, and they found dirt. It took 2 hours. We went late in the afternoon. We wanted to get down to this Pearl farm we were going to spend the night there, but we wanted to get there by supper. I said, we won't get there about midnight. Finally, I said, now, I saw we had a woman in the party. It's all right to go traveling with a bunch of men, but if you have a woman, a Marcia Brown there, she's an awful lovely girl, but she does like to see jewelry. Men don't pay any attention to that. It costs them a lot of money. When they get married, they have to buy a diamond and all that. But the women, they get these diamonds. They like them. Now, I said, we're just going down there and spend a day, and then we're going to Tokyo. Let's go to Pearl Farm. Let's go straight to Tokyo. But Marcia said, Merrill wanted us to go. He's eager for us to go. I said, well, and so didn't know he cared for such silly things as pearls. And we arrived there at midnight. The next morning, a boat was sent to us by the richest pearl merchant in the world, the man who gave us everything to get the pearl above price. The perfect epitome of this, the perfect description. He's now 96 years of age, doesn't see anybody, but he was anxious to see these three friends of Merrill, Voorhees. We were taken across the water. We came, his son, who was 60 years of age, met us and said, we'll have the manager show you through the factory here, the way they produce these cultured pearls, and I'll get word to my father. He won't be ready until 10 o'clock. It gave us an hour, and he doesn't see you people ordinarily, so it's a big honor, of course. And before I went in, I said, is he a Christian? His son said he's one half Christian and one half Buddhist and one half Shinto. He looked like not Pocahontas, but looked like Black Hawk, I guess. He a very homely face, but full of character. And he is so sweet and lovely to us. He could talk English. The divers finding pearls would dive, hundreds of them would dive for a month and finally bring up hundreds of pearls, and finally, out of the hundreds, they'd find one with a pearl. Some little dirt or pebble or something had gotten into the oyster, and it had thrown up a little wall around it and created a rather crooked little pearl, not the finest kind. And he said, why couldn't we put the things in ourselves? But they found every method they used would destroy the oyster, and it wouldn't work. And so then he finally devised a system which is so unique that instead of just diving down and getting one out of hundreds, they produce thousands of pearls every month. The method he used was this. He'd send to America and get mussel shells out of down the Mississippi River, mussel shells. And they'd be cut up and then polished down into little cubes, little spheres. And two of them would be very carefully pushed into an oyster, a living oyster. They dive. Now he has scores of divers, and they bring up the oysters, but they're brought in and they're carefully cultivated that way. Then they're closed carefully, and they're put just about enough for a prayer group, about 12, in a little cage, fastened to a chain, and they have a raft out there, and they have about 100 of those little cages down. Every 3 months they pull them up and clean off the garnishes. No, what are they? The barnacles and other obstacles. And being in the cage, the octopuses and other creatures who try to destroy them can't get at them. They're protected. But every 3 months they're brought up and the barnacles are cleaned off and they put down again. And at the end of 3 years, they're pulled up and brought in, and you have the most marvelous, symmetrical pearls in all the world. Thousands and thousands of them. Perfect. Every one perfect. Now, I saw in that something remarkable. When he met Edison, Edison said, I've been trying for years to invent a way of creating pearls, and you're the only one. He has patents on it, so he's the only one in the world that can do it. I have discovered there a perfect pattern for producing saints by mass production. I'll tell you how saints are produced. I'm just going to tell you definitely how they're produced. Starr Daily was in the underworld for 25 years. Beaten down, whipped around, filled with sins until Jesus came. And that all those sins that gotten in there under his skin, that repentance that came there, all that, he pulled a little wall of repentance and the love of God and his forgiveness, and he's a pearl. Frank Laubach was just a run-of-the-mill missionary until he was 46. Why, you can buy them by the dozen. Missionaries that aren't accomplishing any more, they might just as well be here selling ribbons in the 10-cent store. They aren't really living religion. They're running around and getting clothes for the poor and feeding them and all that, but they don't have this spark that Cobb spoke about yesterday. They don't have any hair they haven't got. A missionary from down the Camp Farthest Out, a retired missionary from India. Oh, if I'd only been here before. All the time I was in India, there were some of those folks who studied the Bhagavad Gita and so on. They believed in trust in God. They believed in the power of prayer, and I didn't believe in prayer. I was busy getting shirts for the poor and looking after things when I could run the kind of a relief station. And I scoffed at all their mystical ideas, thought it was all crazy. Now I could go over there and I could catch hold of them that had that. I could have pulled him and said, Christ will do it better. Oh, he said, all those years I wasted, and that is true. Frank Laubach, a run-of-the-mill missionary, and he failed to be elected the president of the Theological Seminary in Manila. Lost out by one vote. He was the man that deserved to be there. It embittered him. For 2 years he was sick physically and mentally, spiritually and physically. And at the end of those 2 years he said, Lord, I'm ashamed of myself. I've got to make atonement for this sin of mine, this rebellion. You see, that gotten in under his skin. It caused irritation. He put something around it. He said, send me to the hardest place in the world. And they said, well, go to the headhunters, the Moros. You can't take your wife or children. You'll just have to go alone. And there he was, all alone. He couldn't even talk Jesus. They wouldn't let him. So finally he'd go up on the hill and write letters to his father, wistful letters, full of little gems, every one of them. They put in a little booklet called Letters of a Modern Mystic that'll live as long as the Practicing the Presence of God of Brother Lawrence. It'll live longer than his other books. It came out of hurt, the little irritation, the longing, the putting Christ around his defeats. Finally, he said to the priest, what is it? What are your authorities? What do you teach? We teach the book of Luke and the Quran and the first 5 books of the Old Testament. But he said, I don't know much about the Quran. I know a lot about the book of Luke. Supposing I meet with you, priest, once a week, and you teach me the Quran, and I'll teach you the book of Luke. Well, they all came, filled his house. They're going to convert a Christian. But, he lived the thing, and they didn't. Until after a while, just the force of his life began to convert them. There was no Christian church there. When he left, not only was there a great big Christian church, and the son of the daughter of the head chief was a leader in it, but all the rest of them, even the weren't Christians, they loved him so they came down at the wharf and they all sang Onward Christian Soldiers and other Christian hymns they learned for the occasion. Why, he's become a pearl, but he came out of suffering, out of defeat. Here is Catherine Marshall in bed for 2 years with TB. And when I came up and prayed with her, she said, I wish you'd pray for my husband. It wasn't until he got some trouble that he turned. Why, George Hales had a headache. I won't go into all the other things he had. and his need created a need there, and he just put Jesus around there and became a pearl. But then why do we all have to have troubles? Well, man, his only son was killed. Now he's going to give all his life to the war, to the Lord, and so on. Why do we have to wait for these troubles? Now I'll tell you what happened. I want to tell you what happened in England. I told you 7 ministers that are just on fire. Marvelous. They were all of them pearls. Roland Brown went over there in 51 and spoke all over this country. Some of those ministers followed him. Some of them heard him 50 times. He had some American, like the muscle shells, some spiritual muscle. He had some American spiritual muscle, and he inserted it under their souls, and it's grown into pearls. Roland Brown and I went over there, and we would insert the two of us in this person. I won't need to refer to ourselves. Was Merrill Voorhees. When we were there, a man on the train came up and said, "You don't know me, Mr. This is Mr. Voorhees." And I said, "Yes." 20 years ago, 40 years ago, I was in your Bible class, and you changed my life. Some of that muscle got in there. Why? You come to these camps. We don't make you suffer till you turn to God. George Hales and Genevieve Parkhurst and Dalton Miller, we insert a little of some of their experience in there, and in each one of those oysters there was 2 pearls. And when we left the factory, as we went out the door, a head man standing there behind the desk said, "Come here." He said, "Open this pearl." I opened it, and he said, "I'll take out these 2 pearls." He said, "Those are for you." Same with Marcia. Same with... And then this owner of the pearl farms, each gave us a little book, and each of them 2 or 3 pearls in that. I don't know how rich he did make us, but my goodness. I found it's possible to make saints by mass production, by bringing the camps farthest out, having folks that have spiritual muscle in them, insert this into their souls, and we'll just turn them out. But let me tell you, that doesn't do it only. You've got to get in a prayer group, about 12 of you, and belong to a church or something. You'll see a raft. The raft is a church, little prayer groups. About every 3 months, you should go to some little retreat or other and get the barnacles taken off. Once a year, come to a camp farthest out. And in about 3 years, you'll be a saint. You know what? Why, it's the most perfect pattern I've ever seen. And Edison tried to invent the thing, but he's this great pearl merchant. The pearl above price found the secret, and it works. Well, for years we found this working at the camps farthest out. I often, when George isn't around, I refer to him as an example. I often like to refer to Starr Daily, and I'll refer to him right now. One day he was in a house with all his tools around him, working in front of a safe, dead of night, getting ready to rob that safe. He heard a footstep on the stair, and he turned his flashlight on, and he saw a priest coming down the stairs. He took his gun, and he said, "You take another step at your peril." And the priest said, "I mean you no harm," and came on. Starr had never been able, I've never met a man who couldn't control in the dead of night with a flashlight and a gun. He'd never killed a man, but he could control him without any shooting. He said, "You take another step and I'll shoot the daylight through you. I mean you no harm." And he came and turned on the light. He sat down in his chair. He said, "What do you want?" "I want your money." "I'll get you the money. I know the combination. It'll save you the time and the work, and it'll save my safe. But before I give you the money, I want to ask what you plan to do with it." "I'll drink it up. What I don't drink up, I'll eat up." Let me tell you what I was planning to do with it. There's a little lame boy up there, alley, that doesn't have any crutches. I want to see that he gets some crutches. There's a dear old lady that doesn't have food enough. I want to see that she gets her pint of milk every day. He opened the safe, gave him the money, and he told him other things he was going to do, and he said, "You must be hungry, brother. Come out here." And he opened his ice chest and put food on the table, and Starr sat down and ate leisurely. He knew he was safe. He knew the eyes of love of that man was not going to betray him. When he rose and went to the door, the priest said, "You forgot something, brother." "What?" "Why, you left the money here on the table that I just gave you." "If I took that money, I couldn't digest this food." Why, today, Starr Daily has saved more souls than that priest has done. But he planted something. Do you see what I mean? All the Starr Daily said, all his 25 years in the underworld, 14 years in penitentiaries and chain gangs. He said, I've never seen a thoroughly conditioned criminal changed by technology or psychology or anything but the saving power of Jesus Christ. You can use punishment. You can try to create pearls by all kinds of things, inserting this thing and that evil thing, and occasionally you'll get a pearl. Most of the cases, they go to the devil instead when they're beaten down by all these unfortunate things. But you put a living, authentic spiritual experience of someone into a person in need, and you begin to see something begin to happen. Now, I'm not just joking. As I said, I think that St. Peter up there will get red in the face, and all the angels will blush when he hears I'm going around the country saying we can turn out saints by mass production. Why, it's like the Ford plant, turning them out in the line. But the way to do it is to get folks at the training camps, get the right leaders, see that the council rings have nothing but harmony and trust in God, and begin a lot of organizers. Now we can do something with this. A great minister who's a great organizer and has no real this thing in him, said, what's going to happen to you, Glenn Clark, of your work when you die? I said, it'll go on. No, it won't. It'll die with you. I said, no, I'm not like Stanley Jones. When he dies, his 5 ashrams, they couldn't live without Stanley Jones. He has to be there one. Why, the best camps are the ones where I don't go. Now you've got a son-in-law, I understand. You ought to hire somebody to look after the editing and have to raise $5,000, let him be foot free to be be trained to be your successor. I said, no, we can run these things. He said, now I'll fly to New York and meet with any of your rich friends, and I think I can, in 2 years, I could raise $1 million to underwrite you. Well, he's had so many strings, organization, this and that. I'll tell you, folks, this thing has got to we'll just talk to God. And I do know this. It's his job now. They elected me, they're Koinonia Foundation runs Koinonia, but they're now calling themselves the Mission Farthest Out. Frank Laubach is going to retire from presidency. He's all his other work, but we're going to keep him as the emeritus or something. And they elected me president, and I was willing to accept it. I was willing to accept it if they do it on these lines, just as Merrill Voorhees stopped all that mess up there. What he said, we can stop all these robberies. I think I can do it if you let it do it my way. Don't let the police come in on it. Don't let any organizers come in on it. Don't somebody grab it and put a lot of letterheads and glamorize it. We're just going to, you pray with me. I'd like to have you just vision every day. Daydream, if you want to, of seeing $300,000 from flowing in. I don't know how I'd use more than $100,000, but I might as well make it that way. Just vision it. And don't reach down your pocket and hand me a penny or a dollar or anything, unless the Lord should absolutely make you do something, but I want your prayers. If I get the prayers of these camp fathers started this summer, why, we're going to find even the oil wells will commence to lean toward us. We just can't stop a movement like this. Why, all I want to do is now, and I want your prayer also, to find just the right persons to go around the world. Now, we have a number of folks that can teach rhythm wonderfully well. Marcia Brown won't want to go every year, all the time, and somebody could teach art. Somebody could do both of them. Marge Lawrence could, and lead the singing. Lead a bit of help if you had somebody to sing. I think Marge Lawrence, and maybe you'll know some people. They'll be trained here. And we want to have some leaders, but presently this is what's going to happen. If we had this $300,000, I'd just answer Roland Brown right away. Tell those 2 ministers to come over here. We'll furnish the $1,000. We know they can be taken care of, and we'll get them, that way they can go to 3 or 4 camps. It won't cost them anything because they'll go in his car. And when they go back, we'll only need to send one person. Roland Brown alone could go to England and pair with one of them. And another year, they'd have their own leadership. That's what we're going to do. We're going to wean them, these nations, one by one. Well, folks, I don't have my notes here, and I don't know what it is I've forgotten. But I know the Lord's had to do the talking. Well, folks, I feel like saying hallelujah. And tonight, after George's talk, maybe he'll tell us how he turned from a poor old oyster into a pearl, because he really is got something now. He may not, but it isn't him, you know. It's something that came in from Jesus. But at any rate, then we'll go out, right out here, and we're going to have a broadcast. It'll just take about 15 minutes. Don't invite your friends to see us broadcast a speech. We're just going to form a circle and let the God's love come down, and we're going to send that love out over the world. We're doing that in all the camps. And oh, the power of those concentric circles uniting all over the world, we're commencing to feel it already. I just feel the footsteps of these the leaders we want, and I feel the doors opening, and with all this prayer behind me, when I stand before those senators next year, I want to tell you, it won't be Glenn Clark talking, and I wouldn't be surprised we'll create about 3 or 4 pearls, 3 or 4 saints, absolutely there, turned loose in the Senate. With such contagion, they'll just spread it all over that Senate, and I know I'm going to be talking to the president. I just want you to see me putting some pearls in his mouth, too, right under his tongue. You know, right in his heart, right in his soul. Well, this thing is all there. And we're going to ask, I'm not going to ask the president, I'll just this final sentence, for that 300,000. That's what I had in mind when I wrote that book. I'm going to ask a higher authority. If I wanted to get the president to give me an army of 300,000, I'd first step would be to get from folks who had influence with him to write him or see him. And but I'm going to ask the ruler of the universe, and I'm getting some folks who have some influence with the ruler of the universe to ask to give me that 300,000. And all you folks trained in prayer, most of you here have an awful lot of influence with the ruler of the universe. So I'm going to ask you just to talk to the ruler of the universe to give me an army of 300,000 trained prayers, just the right teams to send around the world, and just the right money to give all these scholarships and bring in these ministers. I want to say, when the ministers are on fire, they are the really lineal descendants of the disciples. And I'm here, all the leaders here, that is, the 3 speaking leaders, well, put in this chalk talker, 4 of us, we're all of us laymen. There's a single minister that's giving you messages here, excepting we bring in Brother Holmes to give you a little advice at times. But the point I'm getting at is we're asking you to pray that we can get the money to bring in all the ministers of America that want to come in without, and all those that can't afford it to come in. And when they get on fire, you've got the world saved. The future of this nation lies more in the churches than it does in Congress. So let us bow our head in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this opportunity to just be a channel for Your purpose. And when we stood in that inner corridor of the great pyramid, up there at the king's chamber, at the very top of it, where the prophecy is that now, in 1953, it's come to its end, it's with a symbolical or prophetic symbol that the time for wars have ended. We're going to ask You, Father, to make that come to pass and use us as instruments in any way You wish to bring that prophecy into fulfillment. And so we give this dream, this pattern. We feel that it was dreamed in heaven first. We feel that a good many people it's caught the imagination of thousands of people, but Jesus, we are sure that it caught Your imagination before it caught any of ours, and we're merely reflecting what You have given to us. And so thank Thee. We're going to be Your partners in any way You want to use us. In Jesus' name, amen.